Hey Dan, it's just shy of 10 o'clock on Tuesday night, July 15th, maybe 14th, and it's been a while since I've done a video. I've got so many things I wanted to tell you about, but I will start with this one. Tonight I was out swimming at LeCaine Park, which is down in Goodview, near where Galen was playing soccer on that day that you and I and Gareth and was it Marshall came back from picking you guys up at the airport. And I've been out there swimming a lot, and it's a nice swim. It's about, as near as I can tell, 600 yards in one direction. So we swim down to this biggest tree. I call it Thalia's tree, off into the distance, and then back, and usually right around 8 minutes 20 seconds to get there, and about the same amount of time to get back, oddly enough. And so we've been meeting down there usually Thursday nights for open water swimming, and often I'll go down by myself and I'll swim a couple, because usually the group only swims maybe 1 or 2 at the most, and so I like to swim 4, so right around 3 miles. So I'll swim and then get there maybe 40 minutes early, because it takes me, well, you do the math. But so tonight when I got there, Marshall and I got there, and Marshall wanted to go out and swim as well, and there's a roped off area where probably Marshall can maybe just touch right at the rope, and so he wanted to work on swimming, and so we went down there, and I took off and did a couple of laps, and then when I got back, Lisa, who you met, and Rich, I don't know if you met Rich McDonald, he's the sensei of the kids dojo and also an attorney in town. He came in, he joined us, and another guy named Dan, who I think you met, joined us. And so Lisa took off because she wasn't going to swim, and Rich and Dan and I were getting ready to get in, and there was a group. I mean, there were a couple of big groups down there. It looks like there was a Little League group, and then there was a group of Japanese students, looked like college students, with maybe a handful of Americans with them as well. And while we were getting ready to swim, there's an area where we go that's right at, as you look at the lake, there's a part, like I said, that's roped off, which is all pretty shallow, not probably any deeper than 4.5 feet. And then it's like a little lagoon is what it's like. And then the lake proper, it starts off pretty shallow, and it drops off probably 8 feet out. It's going to be 5 feet deep, and then quickly gets over your head. And so while we were warming up we were getting ready to swim across, one of the American women, college age, jumped in the water, and she was out swimming and was surprised at how warm it was, because it was pretty warm water, and was swimming around and laughing, and all the Japanese students had come down, none of whom were dressed to swim, and none of whom were getting in the water, but were taking pictures, and everyone was laughing and having a good time. And so we took off swimming, and we got to the 600 yards, and usually when I get all the way across, I stop. I stand, and I've got a stopwatch, and I rest for a minute. And so I let Rich catch up with me, because he was maybe 30 seconds behind me. So we stopped, rested, and then we took off back. And I got back in pretty short order on that leg coming back, and I popped out of the water, and the first thing that I see, because it's sort of a little steep, sandy beach that goes up maybe 20 feet up onto the flat area where the shelter is. And up in the sand on that little flat area, I see, as I come out of the water, I'm suddenly met with an ambulance, fire truck, another ambulance, people, and a group of paramedics who were actively working on somebody who was on the ground. And I have my goggles on, my prescription goggles, but of course the first thing I do is I pull them off, and now all I can see is this person lying on the ground. And my fear, of course, as you would probably share it as well, is that this was Marshall, because I had told him before we went out, don't go past the rope, it's really windy out, it's really choppy, I want to make sure you can stay where you can touch. You don't have to be in deep water to learn to swim. And Marshall can swim, okay. He just wanted to learn to swim like I was swimming. That's what he was working on. And so my first reaction, of course, is I ran up, and I sort of elbowed my way, kind of through one of the paramedics, and because I couldn't see. And even though this was obviously a man on the ground, probably almost 6 feet tall and 180 pounds, in my panic, I couldn't be certain it wasn't Marshall. And when I finally looked closely, at the same time as the paramedics yelled at me to get back, I realized it wasn't him. And then as I step back, I see Marshall, and I run over and give him a hug. And I asked him what happened, and he said, well, he was over on the playground when this happened, and he said that he had heard some people say that this guy was under for 3 or 4 minutes, and it was one of the Japanese students. And I don't know what happened. As near as I can figure, he must have gone in, and they lost sight of him. I mean, it's not a clear lake. I mean, it's sort of like Ward Lake. I mean, it's a lake, And but it sounds like they had to drag him out. But he must have been under long enough. And while we were standing there waiting, first I waited for Rich to get back, and then we waited for Dan, who's a fairly slow swimmer, to get back. It was probably 8 or 9 minutes, and they were still working on him, and I didn't see any signs. And I'm fairly certain that he had died. I sent Marshall over to the car and told him to go wait for me. Right or wrong, I didn't know what to do, but Rich and I wanted to wait for Dan to get out of the water and let him know what was going on. I know once paramedics start CPR, they can't stop until they get to the hospital and the doctor pronounces him dead. So whether they're able to bring his body back, I'm assuming that with no signs of life whatsoever, and being under as long as they said he was, that I expect obviously the worst out of that. It looked to me like what I had seen so often when I was a cop. So anyway, that was sort of my day. It was I hugged Marshall and almost started crying. And I really feel for this guy. A lot of his friends were standing around very upset, obviously upset. And I can only imagine, being his parents back in Japan. It's just, you want to help. I wanted to help, but, I knew there was nothing I could obviously do acutely for him, but even, for the situation, I just don't think there was a lot I could have done to help. So, anyway, it was a tough day for that. Obviously tough for him. And I hate for this to be my first video in such a long time, but it's something I wanted to talk about. So I guess I'll end it there. There's other things I want to talk about, but we'll let this video be for tonight. So be well, hug your children, make sure they can swim, and we'll talk to you later.